Hello, this is Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Susana Segat.
And I'm Robert Winters.
Welcome back to our second half hour of just
talk about town.
talk about town.
That's right. So we talked about a few things during the first half hour: caucuses and public restrooms,
Voting in November.
Voting in November, and whatever. Thought maybe we'd touch upon a few other items. One item that's of some controversy, I dare say, right around now, is the disposition of the former Edward J. Sullivan Courthouse in East Cambridge.
That's that really tall tower.
That's the really tall one.
By the Galleria.
Pretty close to the Galleria, right? That gets bounded between, what is it, Thorndike and Spring, 3rd and 2nd.
It's where people used to go when they had to do jury duty.
I remember. It's
so
kind of,
you might know it from that.
right. I think at some point the building was it was determined it was a quote sick building, so that employees didn't want to work there, and eventually the county and the state just sort of vacated.
Well, the
everything.
top was a prison, right?
Actually, except
cell?
for the fact that the prison was closed because of, I think, some water main break or something like that, it's still a jail. And it's, I think, is it in June? I think the prison is supposed to go back, if they're not already back. I don't know about that. But everything, all the other functions of the building have been shut down. I remember going there for jury duty when the place was a bustling kind of place. And now, except for the jail, which may not even be operational at this right now, it's like a farmland down there. I expect to see sagebrush blowing through there.
That's sad.
Well, it's also just sort of closed down. But so the state declared it to be surplus property and sort of put it out there. And I think, I could have this a little wrong, we'd have to talk to some of our East Cambridge planning team friends about this, but I think that it was actually sort of put up as sort of, City of Cambridge, would you like this building? And they said, well, considering the fact that there's going to be tens of millions of dollars in asbestos abatement or whatever, we said, well, thanks, but no thanks. And a process of disposition of the building ensued, and there's some Bureau of Capital Asset Management or something like that was responsible for actually doing the disposition of the building. They put out requests for proposals, and ultimately there were some respondents, and a company called Leggett McCall, I believe, is the name. They're the ones that sort of won the bid and the right to develop it. My understanding is that the title to the building still resides with the state until such time as things actually proceed, which is somewhat contingent on getting permits and whatnot. But therein lies the difficulty. This is a building that almost everybody I know will argue that it should never have been built. It's way out of scale at the neighborhood, but it was built. I don't remember exactly the year of construction.
It looks like a 60s building.
It was probably about a 60s building. I actually have a photo. I was going to make it available here, but I forgot to do it, of actually while it was being constructed. But it's been there, and I certainly remember when I first came here in 1978, seeing the blinking red lights at the top of the one building down there in East Cambridge you could see from my house. So it's sort of been an ever-present thing here for a long, long time. So anyway, so the state put it up there. Leggett McCall was the successful bidder developer for this, and then since then, so I think this was somewhere around, was it last, I think it was January or something of 2013. I'm actually not 100% sure about it, but so they got the right. They purchased and sale executed with the state in January 2013. And then all the meetings ensued with the East Cambridge planning team, et cetera, et
It's
cetera,
a big piece of property.
And it's a real nasty compromise situation, because if you actually add up the amount of money that's necessary just to do abatement or demolition, whatever, to sort of make it financially feasible, it's not so easy. So the argument has been made that, well, we have to maintain the scale of the building just to be able to generate the funds to whatever. But then, neighbors more and more have said, well, we never liked the scale of the building. But proposals that were going to sort of like lop off tops of the property that were, part of the initial disposition, they didn't really go anywhere. So Leggett McCall has been proceeding based on the presumption that in fact they're building within the envelope of the building as it is, right? And And I thought things were sort of proceeding, whether people loved it or not. I don't think anybody loved it. But the thing is, well, I think the up until very recently, the attitude was, well, we're stuck with something that's not going to be beloved no matter what.
Yeah.
So how do we get the maximum community benefit out of it, either in terms of housing units that could be integrated into it, other needs that people in East Cambridge have wanted for a long time, such as a supermarket, you know, just a better streetscape, a better everything, a better looking building, even if it's a big building, whatever. And that's how it had proceeded, right up to the point where I believe it was, actually I know it was supposed to be tonight, was supposed to be, I think, second. There was a planning board hearing on January 7th, and the second hearing was supposed to be tonight at 7 something.
Well, it is then.
Nope. It's been postponed because what has happened apparently over the last week or two or however long is there's been sort of this uprising in East Cambridge. There's a new neighborhood group actually formed, basically saying we want the building just knocked down. But it's not so clear that that's a feasible option, even though people are very passionate about it and everybody can understand why. But
So it was smart for Cambridge not to buy this building.
I think it was smart for Cambridge to not buy the building.
Sounds very stressful.
Right, but you know, the people, you know, you always hear the usual argument, oh, if Cambridge has a lot of free cash, they should just go and buy this and do this and whatever. I don't know if that's particularly logical, but, so anyway, there's part of what makes it complicated and in a certain sense gave the city a little bit of leverage is that in order to make the proposed building, which would be, they would be changing the whole look of it in many ways, even if the scale were to remain.
This is what the company wants?
Yeah, but the thing is, in order to provide, well, basically they were going to arrange for some kind of a trade with the city. The city has a parking garage adjacent to it, right? You know, so this goes from 3rd to 2nd, from 2nd to 1st is a parking garage that's, you know, for a long time it's typically underutilized, and they said, okay, if we allow this building to make use of this parking garage, you know, can we use that to leverage and get good things like the market and whatever? And that was how things were proceeding. But if you think about it, in order to do that, it would require 6 votes of the city council to do a disposition. And now it's starting to look like there's a bit of a movement amongst the city councilors to maybe not make those votes available. Or at least say we're not going to provide the necessary votes. Well, because
they're waiting to see what happens.
I think in many ways it's political populism. You have a neighborhood group rising up. I don't think it's very large, but it is vocal and nobody disagrees with their goal. Everybody would love to see a smaller building. But it's a question of what's legal, what's feasible. You can't sort of just take it. You know, I mean, you did have a successful
And what's
bidder.
affordable?
And what's affordable, what can actually be done. So I don't, you know, I'm usually pretty good at reading the tea leaves in this, but honestly, I can't really read the tea leaves about exactly how this is all going to shake out right now. My biggest fear, to be perfectly honest, is that what you end up happening is a proposal where, you know, the only way to make it work financially is one way, but then the city says, well, we're not going to let you have the parking, and then it's just going to sit there and sit there. And then maybe it'll even be litigated, and who knows. So good things could happen, bad things could happen, but everything is in flux. You know, I had originally thought we were going to get some sort of pretty good description about where we stood in terms of the process, or maybe later tonight I'd go to the planning board and even they would, you know, you'd have a pretty good sense about what the planning board felt was feasible, but it's been postponed, so everything's very, very much in flux. Actually, just to sort of make this a little more real, we actually have some images that I kind of plucked out of the... Let me get that for you. Why, thank you. Right? Now, this is kind of a curious image. It's an image that's being spread around a lot.
Now, what is this?
Well, I believe this is basically looking what the ground, or not just the ground floor, but the lower floors of a restructured, refaced courthouse building would look like. I can't remember what view this is looking from, whether, you know, what street.
This is the ground level view.
This is a ground level view, but I can't remember which streets are looking at here for orientation purposes.
Okay.
But the interesting thing about it is that you sort of see this very nice, tidy looking thing with some brick and whatever, except for that big glass thing sitting on top of it.
I know, but there's accessibility from the street.
No, they're certainly trying to make the best silk purse out of that sow's ear, to be sure. actually, if you scroll down a little bit more, you
Okay.
can kind of see a comparison between old and new. So what you see
Yeah.
here, and actually,
See, now it's really blocked from people.
right, that's what it looks like today.
Yeah.
Right, is just this very, it really looks almost, well, it is a prison. There's a jail on the upper floor. It's got that prison gray look, that prison
Yeah.
gray feel.
It's a 60s building.
Yeah, it's just opaque in every
Yeah, the
imaginable way.
brutest kind of
Really a
thing.
brutal building from every possible way you could describe it. So
That's an official term, I think.
brutalist,
Yeah.
absolutely named for architecture. So if you scroll down, I think you see the again just sort of old versus new. Just again, I think it's pretty much the same image as before.
Yeah.
But I think to kind of get a little bit of the sense about what the difficulty is in terms of public perception, maybe if you scroll down a little further, what you'll see is sort of the full view.
Yeah.
So there what you see is basically on the left you see, just as it is today, it's pretty dreadful. And on the right you see,
Mhm.
you still see this big hulking presence above, which is, being made to look better. So I understanding
It's
is
more
that
reflective.
it's more reflective, but in fact some of the neighbors are actually raising issues about that,
Oh.
whether there be glare or whatever.
Oh.
But it's an improvement I would say, but probably if what you really want is at least some of those top floors knocked off, most people are going to still look at that and find it unacceptable, even if they like what they see down at the ground, the first few floors. This was just the last little image that I have included here was of just sort
the
of a,
garage you were talking about.
yeah. So if this city-owned parking garage could be somehow a deal swung, you would have a market would be facing across the street from where the Galleria is. You'd have the garage, which comes right up to where at 2nd Street, and then across the street is the courthouse site. With a much better landscaped ground floor, sort of okay. I mean, arguably they've tried to make the best possible arrangement out of what's, by most people's understanding, a pretty intolerable building, and to try and make it as tolerable as possible. So anyway, that's kind of where we
Thanks for
stand.
the lesson.
All right. All right. So
Very
let's
interesting.
let's sort of like sneak back into view here.
Speaking of odd things, when there was, not this legislative session, but last legislative session, I know there was a big push by some, the MBTA desperately needs money,
Yeah.
and they're cutting all sorts of services and increasing the fees for the seniors, and really, they're going through a lot of hardship looking for money. And I know that they worked really hard at the last legislative session to try to get naming rights for the historical subway stops.
Right.
And it didn't get anywhere last time. And this time, I think that it was filed again, and I believe it passed, and the MBTA put out this bid to allow companies to spend lots of money to get naming rights on the important subway stops. And there was just an article in the Globe, I think, that said that no one has bid on it. After all this battle, after all that, it didn't happen.
Right.
I mean, it is a hard thing. I mean, would you bid on a station and it constantly...
Well, I had actually already bid on having Central Square named after me, but I think I was outbid.
Actually, you were probably the cheapest bid. You were probably good.
I was outbid by somebody else.
The problem is if there's delayed trains,
Yeah.
so the winter stop is
Oh
delayed
yeah, that's
again.
the one you can't get us. Oh yeah, right. Standing room only. Whoa. Right.
So
Right.
it's a mixed blessing to have your name on a station.
Maybe they'll wait till the major infusion of cash into the MBTA, and then they'll say naming rights, and people go jumping at it, right? But not yet.
Maybe Harvard would bid to have the big station
Yeah.
over there, and
We can
maybe
name
they
it
call it the Harvard
Harvard's-
Square Station.
Hey, there's an idea.
Or the MIT one, we can name it MIT.
Well, there is a story I'll tell another day about the time when Al Vellucci, former mayor, former city council Al Vellucci, threatened to rename Harvard Square Christopher Columbus Square in order to leverage some benefit from Harvard, and Harvard relented.
I wonder why.
Right. So, I guess names matter. All right, there are a few other things that are of some significance. I'm just going to jump around a little bit. This one here is not so. This is not an item of about development or transportation,
I
whatever.
can't see it.
This is a school-related one. You know, when the so-called innovation agenda, better known as the
Moving K-8 to middle schools.
yeah, but the middle schools are really kind of hybrid because the buildings actually house both the what they love to call upper schools, which it's 6, 7, 8, together with an elementary program.
It's just like going to Starbucks and using their language. No, I just want a small coffee.
Yeah,
This is
that's
really
it.
a middle
That's
school.
it. It's a middle school to me, and I keep calling it the middle school. They call it the upper school. I
Call
call
it
it the middle
anything you
school.
want. It's a middle school.
But you know, I actually was very attracted to the proposal when it first came down, and the only thing I kind of got a little annoyed at the end is that in the later stages of approval of the innovation agenda, being a mathematics instructor, you know, they basically were going to say that if a kid wants to sort of accelerate in math, they weren't going to allow it. That was sort of against the policy, school committee policy, I might add. And I sort of had to hold up this hope that, well, maybe after a year of the innovation agenda, the whole thing will sort of not work out so well, and then they'll say, well, maybe we have to revisit that policy. Well, guess what happened, folks? They're revisiting the policy. And tonight, I think actually starting 16 minutes ago.
Thank you for
Right.
staying here instead of going over
That's
there.
right. But you may, if you want to discuss this, I may go over it afterward. This Cambridge School Committee is actually taking up, I believe they may vote on a policy. It's a proposal for math in the Cambridge upper schools to commence with the next year, which would actually allow, not for 6th grade in the middle school, that would be everybody comes in together, which I think is fine. But the thing is, as you're in those middle school years, as some people sort of, you know, want to kind of like creep ahead and do here, they're actually going to create sort of different threads that students could follow, you know, as long as they kind of meet the necessary requirements and evaluation to basically say that you can do it. So you could do, I mean, I'm not going to sort of get into the specifics of it, but you could basically do
So different threads by ability.
some of it, yes. But the thing is that you know, because I think they don't want to kind of necessarily go whole hog that way. They're also at the same time proposing some summer school options for other students here to make sure that they are all going to be working at grade level. So it's sort of a dual proposal that basically says we're going to provide opportunities for those who are going to try and you know push on, but we're also going to provide opportunities free of charge for some summer program in order to sort of make sure everybody sort of at least stays at grade level. So now, you know, I'm not a person who feels the need to do any of this so-called leveling of classes for all subjects, but I've always felt that in mathematics, there's just something about the nature of mathematics, the way one thing sequentially builds on another, that you can't just sort of say, well, we're going to have a classroom here where these kids are going to be doing calculus and these kids are going to be doing algebra, you know.
Well, as long as you don't give up on the kids that are in the lower.
That's right, and I think that's one of the...
That's important. That's the important thing. You just can't give up on them.
That's right, and that's actually one of the really attractive things about this proposal that I was reading today, was that they really are trying to handle all aspects here. So it's not just providing opportunities for the kids who want to kind of inch ahead a little faster, but also opportunities for everyone else. So I think that's a really good development, and I think it has support. You know, we'll see what goes on. I know of at least 2 school committee people who are pretty enthusiastic about it.
Since you're paying attention to that, is it true that they've given up on foreign language instruction?
I think that for the current year, I think that there's going to be a battle. I mean, I don't follow school committee stuff that much other than math. I know my one thing, right? But there's definitely a lot of argument going on about that.
Because a lot of it was, the innovation agenda was to give space for foreign language instruction, and now to just take it totally off the table.
I think it was a matter of you couldn't do everything, so some things had to be compromised, and that's what got compromised. So now I think the budget is being introduced next week or within the next few weeks, and there will be arguments. You will have a lot of public comment. People are going to be going back and forth like mad over this.
We've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
We've lost 20 years of students.
Yeah.
Not learning it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's definitely something for those who follow the schools to sort of be aware of. All right. Let's see.
So if you care about any of these issues, talk to your school committee people. Definitely
talk to your school committee people about those. Let's see now. Oh yeah, here's another item that was. This is kind of like a sort of I'm going to call it a promise made good. Last year at City Council, there was a proposal, typically referred to as the MIT Kendall or Kendall MIT zoning petition, that was controversial in that some people thought that there should be no commercial buildings whatsoever built on the MIT side of Main Street. Other people said, no, that's totally consistent with MIT's historical mission of working together with industry, which is also quite true. But at the time, it was like people from the graduate student, I think Brian, who's going to call him Brian, great guy, whose last name begins with an S, who was the head of the graduate student council at MIT. He was really bringing forward the issue of the need for graduate student housing. And it's true. There is a need, demonstrable need for graduate student housing. They have plenty of it, actually, but the thing is that there's not enough. And because it used to be that the typical graduate student, like when I was a graduate student at MIT, I was no way in hell I was going to actually live on campus. I was just going to look for a place to live, and I did, and that's where I am today, actually. But it's harder to do that. It's just incredibly more expensive now. So there's a lot more willingness of graduate students to actually look on campus for housing, and there is a demand. So when those...
Excuse me, do all the freshmen have housing all 4 years at MIT? Is that their policy?
Yeah.
They have enough housing
they
for all the
have an
freshmen?
option
For all the undergraduates, I mean?
Yeah, they do. There's actually, though even that is a little bit of a problem because like Bexley Hall I think is about to get demolished because it was ready to fall down. So during that time, there will be a need to house some of those undergraduates who are in that building. So anyway,
but that's temporary. Some schools say, we want you on campus 2 years and then do whatever you want. And some of them say there's enough housing for you to be on campus all 4 years if you want it.
The typical MIT undergraduate stays on campus or in a fraternity building. Yeah. There's a lot of options, but it tends to be still MIT or MIT-ish buildings, though not all. Graduate students were a whole other population. Historically, they either scattered, some of them stayed on campus. There was a big distinction between married student housing and single students. There's also been a big growth in the number of postdoctoral fellows who are at MIT, also competing for housing. It's actually a lot more people competing for housing. So I think nobody questioned that there was going to be some need for additional housing. So they passed this zoning. People said, oh no, you can't pass this until you settle the housing. And they said, no, trust us. We're going to do this. We're going to get Phil Clay, and he's going to chair this faculty, but actually wider committee that was going to study the whole problem of graduate student housing. And they came back, good to their word, and they came back and said, it's true. We need to get at least to, I think, what did they say? It was something like 600 or so units, 500 to 600 beds for graduate students is a demonstrable need. What's not determined...
How many graduate students do they have?
Well, when I was there, it was usually, you could guess it was about 5,000 undergraduate, 5,000 graduate, 5,000 staff, faculty staff, more or less. But now it's considerably more, largely more graduate students, more postdocs, et cetera. It's probably well over 6,000 now. But so anyway, the question now is not so much, do you need to build some more housing? MIT says we will, but where? Is one big question. Some people said, well, honestly, they were using it as leverage to not build commercial stuff in Kendall because they said you should really be building graduate student housing. Well, not so clear that that's the highest and best use. Some of it will appear there. Some of it, I think, may appear elsewhere in the MIT environment, maybe the northwestern part of the campus, but some will be built. The report also came back and identified the need, in part because of places like Bexley that are going to get demolished, for, quote, swing space for undergraduate housing, of another in the vicinity of, I think they said, maybe, was it 400 beds there as well.
What does swing space mean?
Well, while certain buildings are being renovated, you need to put students somewhere. Sometimes you just rent space.
Housing.
So you need to put them in the meantime. I think ultimately if they build space that's so-called swing space, ultimately it will end up becoming permanent housing, so they better build it well. But, I actually feel pretty good about it, as a person who works at MIT, that, they said they were going to actually study the problem. They came back and
a possible solution.
Yeah, they said we're going to do this. And now there was a separate process during some of the planning for the Kendall Square area. And in that was sort of separate from the housing issue. So now they have to kind of put their heads together and kind of rework a little bit of the proposals for Kendall area to say, okay, So now that we've identified that we need approximately this many beds, how will we be incorporating some of those down there? And I think they will. But how many and where else?
Now, are there community groups that are paying attention to this?
I
How does
think,
that work when it's a university?
honestly, it would depend on the university, but, in this part here, there are sort of citywide groups who are sort of using this as sort of a flashpoint for organizing, but typically the people who I actually see coming to the meetings down there for Kendall Planning are typically people associated with the East Cambridge Planning Team, they've been around since the beginning, and, and they're not going away. So, they're there. You see people like Barbara Broussard and others coming to the meetings very religiously. So, so there's definitely community input, and that will continue. So anyway, I thought that was a pretty a significant news item of sorts. So anyway, there are other things I suppose I could mention. I'll just sort of, since we only have about another minute here, I'll just sort of mention one or two last little things here. The one thing I was going to mention of significance is that, because I know I've mentioned it before.
You brought cheat sheets today.
I did bring cheat sheets. I needed them. Was that there was this the H Mart was supposed to come to Central Square, and it got delayed and delayed and delayed.
I don't know what that is.
Well, it's an Asian market. They have a big store up in Burlington. It's going to be a much more scaled down thing, but it has like food courts and arguably affordable food, which in Central Square, which actually lost the Purity Supreme some number of years ago. Yeah, we got the Star Market of sorts, but we lost the Purity Supreme. So, now we're going to be getting the H Mart, and I go by there most every day, and it's really moving along now. So I think it's going to happen soon. So, anyway, for those around Central Square, be on the lookout for H Mart. So, anyway, that's it for another edition of Cambridge Inside
Out.